I'm excited to share some things with you this week. Last week, we talked about some of the different things happening in the legislature, and specifically the sensitive material bill and issues that I've got going, and that made it out of committee, made it out of the floor of the House. It's now in the Senate, so those things are moving. But I've got a bill that I need to get moving that we're working on. I've been working on for quite a long time, and it's my top priority bill that we're working on because I'm concerned, like you. I'll tell you a little secret. I love ice cream. Love ice cream. And if I could have ice cream 3 times a day, 7 days a week, I probably would. Shouldn't. My wife wouldn't let me, thankfully. But you've probably noticed, like I've noticed, that when you go to the store now, your half gallon of ice cream is not a half gallon anymore. You're lucky if it's a quart and a half or even a quart, and it costs twice as much. They have a name for this, right? You see that in cereal. You see it in all the packaging, right? You buy a bottle of Gatorade and the bubble in the bottom of the packaging goes about halfway up the bottle so that you're getting less in the liquid and the material that you're buying, and the prices are going up. They have a term for this. It's called shrinkflation. Shrinkflation is just another name for what we see in food for inflation. And this is happening all over the nation, all over the world. And, people wonder why this is happening, and it really is not a mystery. It's happening because our federal government is printing money at a breakneck pace. The debt is increasing. The spending coming out of Washington is increasing at a rapid pace. And to fund their excess spending, they can't borrow anymore. They borrowed from all of the friendly sources, and then they borrowed from all of our adversaries. I can't even imagine what it must have been like being in the room when someone said, "Hey, we borrowed from all of our people. We borrowed from all of our friends. I've got a great idea. Let's go borrow from the Chinese and the Russians and others. What could go wrong there, right?" And now we can't even borrow from them anymore. China is selling our debt and buying gold. All of the nations of the world are selling U.S. debt and buying gold. And actually, we're having a hard time placing long-term U.S. Treasury bonds, the 10-year and the 30-year bonds. They actually had a scare in October trying to place the 30-year bonds. And when we can't place that debt anymore, the dollar has a massive collapse and a massive shock. And that's already happening around the world. So what does that have to do with anything in Utah, and what does that have to do with anything in District 39? Well, very simply, we've got some provisions in our Constitution, again, that our federal partner has completely ignored. In Article 1, Section 8, Clause 4, it says that Congress's role is to coin money and regulate the value thereof and fix the standard of weights and measures. Well, think about that. To coin money and fix the value of weights and measures. When the Constitution was ratified, there was a definition for a dollar. The definition of a dollar was 371 and a quarter grains of silver. That was a dollar by definition, 371 and a quarter grains of silver. It came from the Spanish dollar, and that's what the coin that they used. It was a pure silver coin that had that specific weight, that fixed weight to it. And when you think about it in the Constitution, it says to coin the money and fix the standard of weights and measures. To give you an example, the difference between fixed standard in money and fixed standard in everything else. Imagine you go to the butcher and you say, "Yay, butcher, I want a pound of hamburger." And he or she comes back with a thimble and says, "Here you go. Here's a pound." And you said, No, I wanted a pound. They said, "Well, that's a pound now. We've just changed it. We just let it, we decide on a week by week basis what a pound is." We all would see and understand that immediately. It was supposed to be the same with our money. A dollar was 371 and a quarter grains of silver. And elsewhere in the Constitution, it even says in Article 1, Section 10, it says that no state shall make anything but gold and silver coin a tender in payment of debts. So if you take out the negatives, it says states must make gold and silver coin legal tender for payment of debts. And the purpose for that goes right back to Article 1, Section 8, Clause 4, that there's a fixed standard for the payment of debts. There's a fixed standard of money for our economy. And it was like that until 1913, when the Federal Reserve came in and the income tax came in. And then in the 1930s, President Roosevelt actually confiscated everyone's gold. And they pegged gold at $35 an ounce. So they pegged gold to the dollar. And after World War II, the United States dollar became the world reserve currency. And it was pegged at $35 an ounce, which was okay at the beginning because that was about the price of gold, and miners could mine gold for less than $35 an ounce. And so we had a supply of gold that matched the supply of dollars until we got into the 1960s. And in the 1960s, we had the Vietnam War and the Great Society, and the federal government just ran the printing press. And Americans, US citizens, could not even own gold. Foreigners could. And we had, in the United States, we had gold and silver certificates that were backed by a percentage of gold, but you couldn't actually go redeem them for gold or silver. Foreigners could. So in international trade, they could exchange their dollars directly one for one for gold. Well, then what started happening throughout the late 1960s, the foreign nations, particularly France, and France owed a large debt to the United States, and instead of paying the debt and requiring France to pay the debt, France at one point actually showed up in New York Harbor with a destroyer loaded with pallets of dollars and demanded the gold. And this created a great deal of concern, shockwaves through the financial centers and through Washington. And on August 15th, 1971, President Nixon closed the gold window. He said he was closing it temporarily. It's kind of been a long temporary period since 1971. But he closed the gold window in 1971. And in 1971, when he did that, the average home cost $17,000. You could also buy the average home for 17,000 grams of gold. Today, the average home, we're hearing about housing affordability, and houses are unaffordable, and 76% of the people in Utah could not afford the average home. The average home today costs $500,000, 30 times more than it did in 1971. But the average home in grams of gold is 55% less. How could that be? Well, we're more efficient, more effective at building. We're more effective at the materials and the supplies. And the average home, even from 1971, would be bigger and more efficient and have better material. And yet it would be 55% less in a fixed standard. In gold, if we still had a fixed standard of money, it would be 55% less. And yet in dollars, because our federal government is printing dollars at a breakneck pace, they're taking the value of dollars right out from under us. They're taking the cost of our material, our time, our labor away from us. If you think about what money represents our liberty, our life, our time. We work and we trade and we do businesses, and we do that to provide for our family, provide a future, provide for our retirement. And we store that time, that work, that labor in money. so that we can trade it. Excuse me. So that we can trade it with others, and it's usable. Well, that means of exchange is being taken out right out from under us. Imagine if the $2,000 checks that were sent out to everyone during COVID, imagine if they told you this free money would only cost you 10% of everything you've ever saved, 10% of everything you would ever earn. Would you take the $2,000 check? Of course not, right? But we were never given that fine print. But the $2,000 check just came from printing more money, which made all of our other money, everything we've ever earned, everything we've ever saved, everything we ever will earn, worth less. So we have to work harder to just stay in place. And so this is what we're seeing. Now, in 1971, when Nixon took us off the gold standard, Henry Kissinger and those working for him went to the Middle East to work out a substitute for the gold standard. And they said, we'll protect you with our armies. We'll give you military equipment, Saudi Arabia and the Middle East, if and only if you only sell oil for dollars. And that became known as the petrodollar, that they only sell oil for dollars. And from 1973 until now, until just December 31st of 2023, the world had to have dollars to buy oil. And so when the United States would print dollars, the world had to have them if they had to have oil to keep their economy going. It was in essence like we had a gun to the head of the world. If you want to get oil to run your economy, which you have to run your economy, you have to have dollars to buy oil. Well, China had started working against this for the last 30 plus years. They decided that it wasn't good that the United States had a gun to the world's head, that we could just print money indiscriminately and send our inflation out to the world. And so China started working to unseat the dollar as the reserve currency standard. And they formed an organization, a trading bloc called the BRICS: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. And with this BRICS trading bloc, they decided they were going to begin to trade in their own currencies, and especially when Russia invaded Ukraine and the United States decided to use the dollar as a weapon. And we weaponized the dollar and said we were going to shut down Russia's assets and shut them down worldwide. And the message this sent to the rest of the world was, if they can do that to Russia, they could do it to us. And if we're holding all of our reserves in dollars and we're trading in dollars and we do all of our economy in dollars, we have to buy oil in dollars, we're all at the mercy and at the risk of a United States government that is now $34 trillion in debt. It's just printing dollars to stay afloat and sending that inflation out to its own people and the rest of the world. We're not so good with that. And as of the end of last year, the beginning of this year, countries around the world are now starting to trade oil in currencies other than the dollar. And that runs the risk of the value of our dollar just falling through the floor. And we all know, it's just common sense. You can't print prosperity, which is what our federal government is trying to do. Governments around the world have tried this experiment over and over and over again. Rome tried it, failed. Spain tried it, failed. All countries, Great Britain tried it, failed. They watered down the money, the value of the money. And over time, the nations of the world just simply decide they will not continue to give real things for worthless pieces of paper. And now worthless ones and zeros, right? Digital marks on a computer. So we're seeing this issue with the dollar. What's interesting is homes priced in dollars have gotten less expensive. It's the same with everything. Big Macs priced in a fixed standard like gold, they're the same price since the 1980s. But if you go to McDonald's, it's now $8, $10 for a Big Mac in different places here and around the world. Piano, same price. College tuition, same price. Prices haven't changed in a fixed standard. But in dollars, the prices are going through the roof. But we have an option. We have the ability to preserve the purchasing power of our earnings and savings. And this is the bill that I'm working on. It's House Bill 348. It has kind of a weird name. It's called Specie Legal Tender Amendments. And specie legal tender is the legal term for gold and silver as currency. And so specie legal tender amendments would simply provide a convenient, fractional, transactional, functional way for the average person to save some of their earnings in a fixed standard, to be able to transact in that fixed standard and buy things where if you buy a gold coin today, it's hard to buy a haircut with a $2,000 gold coin. Hard to buy a loaf of bread with a $2,000 gold coin. Most people don't even know where to buy a gold eagle coin. So the idea is we would create a digital transactional, fractional way for the average person to buy $10 worth of gold or 10 million. It would be vaulted in Utah, audited in Utah, would have to be insured in Utah. You'd have to be able to convert what you bought in gold back into dollars or into actual physical gold on demand. And those are the things we're working on. And the reason for that is to protect your earnings and your savings, that the $5 you would pay for a gallon of milk today would buy a gallon of milk next year and 10 years from now. The $5 you would pay for a Big Mac today would buy a Big Mac a year from now and 10 years from now. That you won't lose the value of your earnings and savings. And that's happening so rapidly. When we talk about housing affordability, that it astounds me that if we simply had the same fixed standard of our money, houses are less expensive than they've ever been. It's only in dollars that the average person can't afford to buy a home. What we know now, with our nation now $34 trillion in debt, and $10 trillion of that debt comes due this year, which means more than ever, our federal government has to go into the capital markets and ask the world to loan us money. In a world now that we know is less and less willing to loan money to the United States. That means interest rates are going to rise. The amount of dollars they're going to print is going to increase. It's something called the M2 money supply. And it's been going vertical over the years, where they're just printing more and more and more. And with every dollar they print electronically, it reduces the value of everything you've saved, everything you've earned. So I think this is, in my estimation, the most critical way that we have to protect our liberty. There are efforts now in the United States and around the world to do something called a central bank digital currency, a CBDC. And nations representing 98% of the population of the world are working on CBDC, central bank digital currencies, and they explain why. With a central bank digital currency, you have a digital money that is then controllable. It can be controlled by the issuer of the central bank digital currency. And they talk about this in the meetings they have with the UN and the World Economic Forum and elsewhere. They talk about the ability that if people are eating too much unhealthy food, their money can be shut off. If they're driving too much, if they're flying too much, their money can be shut off and they can just no longer buy those things. They even talk about if people are buying guns or ammunition to defend themselves, their money would be shut off, that they just simply couldn't buy those things. And they talk about this somewhat gleefully, at how great the world would be if they could just simply control people by controlling their money. That is so opposite the very foundation of the United States of America. We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men are created equal, endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. To secure these rights, governments exist among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. But governments throughout time have been interested in growing their power, controlling people. There is no surer way to control the people and to destroy free government than to control the money. Even Lenin, let me back up, the great economist that's cited so often, John Maynard Keynes, quotes Lenin, and he says that there is no surer way to destroy a free market system than to debase the currency. By a system of inflation and deflation and controlling the money supply, they destroy freedom and liberty in a way that not one man in a million even sees it coming. And this is what we're facing today. By the control of our money that is no longer a fixed standard, that is no longer like 371 and a quarter grains of silver, a fixed standard like the pound, a pound measurement or a foot or a yard measurement is. Our money no longer is a fixed standard. And we're seeing that we're losing value, we're losing pace in our economy. We're working harder than ever. No longer can a family get by on one income. And now with two incomes, we're barely able to stay in place, which leaves us no time to be engaged in our government, to hold government accountable, to prepare for the future, to provide for our children, to have a little extra for a rainy day. People are barely getting by because our money, our medium of exchange, the value is being taken right out from under us. So House Bill 348, if this appeals to you, if you're interested in helping with this, please reach out to me. I would love your help. I need help moving forward, educating legislators around the state and making sure that we can move forward in this and secure the purchasing power of your earnings and your savings, that you not only keep what you earn, you keep the value of what you earn. And it's not taken away by government subterfuge and manipulation. So grateful for the opportunity to share this with you. If you have thoughts, comments, questions, please reach out to me. This is absolutely my top priority. We'll continue to work on this through the legislative session throughout the coming year. And look forward to your thoughts, your feedback. Please reach out to me. VoteIvory.com is the website. VoteIvory@gmail.com is my email, and look forward to working with you on this critically important issue. So that's all for now. We'll have more next week.